12. I'm hoping, I'm looking ahead now just to see what the schedule will look like tomorrow because 12 is a nice short chapter, so it's no problem getting that done today. And then 13 and 14. 13 is longer, 14 is quite a bit shorter, so I may space those out and not do exactly to the chapter end on those. But there'll be two more coming tomorrow to try to get us caught up to where we need to be. But we're all in for chapter 12, so. In the darkness of the dungeons of Nepal City Castle, now Castle Bane, there would appear to the casual observer to be a near silence disrupted only by ambient sounds of dripping water and aged, creaking walls or furniture. But if one were to listen more closely, taking their eyes from the hall of cells or from the many tables and shelves lined with D'Arveron's collection of tomes and experiments, the echoing stone would yield far more unnerving sounds, the soft whisper of unnatural breath, the scrape of something clawed across the floor, and an even more alarming shuffling groan from the deepest recesses of the dungeon. D'Arveron himself had been warned not to venture too far, for there were many things in the depths that had been forgotten, but had not themselves forgotten the world above. Whether they festered with lust for the surface or a hatred of it, the ancient wizard could not say, nor was he yet prepared to learn. Soon, though, the text Freyan had brought him had begun to unlock the secrets of true power, but D'Arveron had returned to Castle Bane to make preparations for the next stage of his evolution. The skin-bound book had spoken of dread beings tied to gods and powers far older than the ones D'Arveron served now, and he must have what they could offer. Wrapped in his layers of dark but expensive silks, the decayed mage stepped through his portal that connected his laboratory to Marlpaz. He had constructed it after Wolfbane commanded him to remain in the fortress, watching the insects of Angladeus try to clamber over his mighty wall. The last attempt had, at the very least, proven amusing. The young knight standing alone, like some solemn testament to the greatness of his nation. It would have pleased D'Arveron to snuff his life out then, just to throw the austere pride of the Angladaics back in their faces. But he had not lied when he told his foe that there would be true terrors to come for he and his people. D'Arveron had not, in that moment, realized the wonderful irony of his own words. His perusal of the dread book gifted him by Freyan had unveiled that much of what he sought lay beneath Alderlast, and thus he had returned to Castle Bane to make ready for a journey into enemy territory. D'Arveron was deep into his musings over a number of spell components and a few hastily written scrolls, which would allow him to wield arcane power without drawing on his own, admittedly vast reserves of strength when he heard the loud clearing of a throat. He spun, somewhat startled, to see none other than Wolfbane, seated at one of the many desks strewn about his laboratory. The commander of the Nerathians was flipping idly through a book spread out before him and spoke without raising his head. "I thought you'd come down here eventually, wizard. I don't know what I expected to find, nothing good for certain, but your little workshop is almost a disappointment." Wolfbane closed the book with a dramatic swipe of his hand and brought his eyes up to meet D'Arveron's. "I thought I'd find children being sacrificed and women tortured, or perhaps a corpse stitched together and brought back to life." Internally, D'Arveron mocked Wolfbane for his lack of creative thinking, but he said, "I'm not a blood priest, nor plague of Namar. Cruelty for the sake of cruelty does not interest me. You'd think I might find that comforting, but I do not." "How did you find your way down here? Did a servant show you?" Wolfbane smiled. "Relax, mage. You don't need to go executing any servants. I've known about your trapdoor for some time, right off the main hall and out of the way of prying eyes. I don't mind you making use of the space, and since we are keeping no one of importance in the dungeons now, it hardly needs to be up to accommodations for others." Wolfbane's brow furrowed then. "Though I swear I've heard movement and cries from down the halls. At first I thought rats, but it seemed too big." "Rats, yes," D'Arveron was quick to agree. "They move in considerable numbers. It can sound as though they are far larger than they truly are." Wolfbane nodded, though he seemed unconvinced. Then he reached out and pulled a cloth-wrapped item from beneath the table and held it to D'Arveron. "I came looking to you, because this seems like something that surpasses my understanding, but by all appearances would fit your unique areas of interest." D'Arveron, despite his annoyance at Wolfbane's intrusion, felt compelled to investigate. He walked over and carefully peeled back the folds of cloth. A gem, throbbing and pulsating slightly in the commander's hand, sat there. It looked like a multifaceted hexagonal ruby or garnet, but was coated in a strange black fluid and seemed alive. D'Arveron recognized it, or thought he did, and carefully lifted it up in the faint candlelight Wolfbane had been reading by. He could see alien shapes moving within the stone, and beneath his face wrap he gave what passed for a smile with his ruined jaw. Wolfbane watched him intently, and D'Arveron determined he could not hide the true nature of this wondrous item from the barbarian, at least not completely. "Where did you find this?" "Caramon Araphos and I responded to a report of people and animals being savaged by an unnatural beast near the Whitewood. We killed whatever this thing was, and I found that inside of it." "Describe the creature." D'Arveron was moving quickly now. Taking the gem over to one of his tables, he swept the mess of items on it to the floor and waved his hand, igniting a small number of candles set into the tabletop as he did. He pulled the beloved book from one of his travel bags and set it in the black-coated jewel next to the black-coated jewel and began flipping through pages earnestly. It was a large beast, probably a bear at one point, but with many protruding spikes and spines. Its bones had burst through the skin in places, and its swollen muscles that seemed to break free of the fur. Wolfbane shook his head as he recalled the monster. It must have been in great pain, but seemed to have a singular intent. To kill, no doubt. Deveron found the page he saw and straightened from his perusal. Wolfbane walked over to look down at what the mage was studying. He could not read the text, but an illumination of daemons and a stone identical to the one resting on the table told him what he needed to know. As I thought, something demonic resides within that gem. Could it be the remnants of a servant of the god Sorcerer? Nepal City was assaulted during the Arcane Wars, and there were accounts of impossible monstrosities in the armies of the attackers. This, Deveron said, pointing at the illustration, is a jewel in which the essence of a being's soul, if you wish to think of it that way, has been sealed. The resulting stone can exert a significant influence over whatever bonds to it. At the most simplistic level, that is what it does. It exerts its will, and then it attempts to come forth from within the bound creature. So the bear ingested it, or something like that, and it started to turn into whatever it was I killed. That is one way to think of it, yes. Deveron's voice was hushed in reverence. He picked up the gem and studied it once more. But that is also the most limited way in which the will of what is within this stone can be channeled. There are many more terrible things it can give a kind of life to, with proper guidance. Wolfbane eyed his ally of necessity cautiously and began to wonder, not for the first time, if bringing him the gem was a mistake. Reaching out, he said, "If it's that dangerous, we should destroy it." Deveron pulled the stone quickly out of reach, his eyes flashing with a hot flame of rage. "What? And waste an opportunity? No, I will study it and find a way to make it of use to us. You said this thing inside the stone will try to exert its own will over anyone and anything. What if it overpowers you? I assure you the results were not pleasant when it came to the bear." Deveron recovered somewhat from his violent reaction and set the gem down on the table. Closing the book, he turned to Wolfbane, and in a voice more contrite than the warlord would have expected, said, "I know that we are on opposing sides of intent when it comes to the particulars of this campaign, but I do believe that it is in your best interest to harness the power of this artifact. Think of the men you lose fighting in the south, here in the north against the resistance, and the stretching of supply lines and logistics that grow in number and complexity each day. This could give you the key in supplementing so much of the march toward conquest and bring all under your control far sooner than conventional means of war." Wolfbane stared at Deveron, trying to see through his words to the truth behind them. "I know you, mage. You don't care about this war. I'm not certain you care at all for our master. If you want to keep this thing, it's only because it serves you well. So don't lie to me." "True," Deveron conceded. "I'm most invested in the pursuit of power, but there is no reason why our goals can't be intertwined. You wish to take all of Legotia and Southron for Narath. Fine, then let me help you do it. Let me keep the stone, and I can promise I will find some way for it to aid you." Wolfbane felt like a spider crawling down the back of his neck, a seed of doubt that he should not have come at all, but since it was too late for that, another inkling that he should take the stone and leave at once. He could not say if it was fear for what Deveron might do with it, or because the darkest parts of himself craved the thing and wanted that it should stay near his hand. Finally, he tore his eyes away from the gem he had fixed his gaze upon and walked towards the trap door. "Keep it then, and I want to hear from you within a month what it can offer us and Narath. If nothing comes of it, I'll destroy it myself." Without waiting for a response, Wolfbane clambered out of the dungeon and left Deveron with his new prize. The wizard tapped the gem with a long fingernail and felt a thrill as it glowed brighter where he touched it. He wrapped it once more and closed his beloved book, thrusting both into a travel pack and gathering a few scrolls to bring along. He heard the shuffling and scraping from down the hall once more and spoke to the darkness. "You must continue to wait, my friend. It will be time for you and yours soon, but not yet." A faint hiss came from around the corner as Deveron stepped through the portal. The glow of its nimbus shone briefly on the horrid figure, one claw gripping the cornerstones of the dungeon hall, peering into his laboratory. The whiskers and yellowed fangs were terror enough to drive any man or woman to long and sleepless nights, but the black nails gouging the stone and the dead red eyes exceeded all sense of madness. Worse still, as the light of the portal went out, there was a mass of many more crimson orbs behind the rodent's face, watching their leader and waiting. Felissa Ulfrin walked down the streets of Gyla-Kill, checking and rechecking each corner at every 100 yards to ensure that one of her soldiers was on duty and alert. She now had more men and women in the streets than on the walls, and in truth, there was probably no need to have them watching outside the town. Gyla-Kill was not going to be attacked. Any enemies the Broken Horde had were far away and preparing to be assaulted, not thinking of counter-offensives. She was pleased to see her new policies were in place. It had only been a few days since she began locking down one quarter of the city and protecting anyone among the refugees or civilians who came in. As she neared the northern border of her claim, she could hear shouting coming from behind a guard post. Just ahead, she could see a number of her followers, recruited from those who'd fled Nepal during the fall of the Empire, standing unmoving against a small unit of Goranath soldiers, backed by one of Hrothgar's minions. Felissa walked up, her head high and her hair flowing in the cold air, making certain they saw her. The argument stopped, and the soldier loyal to Hrothgar tried to push his way forward, only to be halted by a firm hand on his chest from one of Felissa's guards. Looking at his opposition incredulously for a moment, he turned his eyes back on her and said, "Thane Ulfrin, these men are preventing us from searching the streets in this area." "Yes, they are. How observant of you." The man was astounded at her dismissive tone, as Felissa stopped before him and crossed her arms. He looked at the others beside him and said, "We have to get in there. We need to gather some more volunteers." "Volunteers for what?" There was a bit of snickering from the broken contingent, and Hrothgar's man could not hold back a dark smile. "Well, for dog training, of course." Melissa remained unmoved. "You mean victims for the gnolls?" One of the brokens shouted from the back, "They tore into one of our companies yesterday because you hadn't fed them enough lately. We just need some of them refugees, and we can get the beasts back to behaving." "Well, it sounds to me like you have a solution to your problem." Melissa smiled at the group. "Serve up whoever among you is weakest and least useful. That should satisfy the gnolls and improve our efficiency as a fighting force at the same time." She brushed past them and into the main road, calling over her shoulder, "If they try to get past the barriers, kill them." The group outside the makeshift wall was stunned, but they backed up and left the former Napoleons alone. As Melissa walked swiftly down the road towards the Inn of the Four Winds, she saw Hrothgar riding towards her. Ignoring him, she kept up her stride, forcing him to turn round and slow his mount to stay with her. "What do you think you're doing?" She ignored him and still kept walking. Hrothgar brought his horse round and cut her off, forcing her hateful stare on him. He leaned down from the saddle and said, "Your men won't let anyone from the army into the southwest quadrant except, for some damned reason, the miserable people of this town. The gnolls killed 20 of our men today. We need to keep them in line until the war machines have been finished." Felissa did not even flinch, her eyes boring back into his. "It sounds to me like they are in line. There will no longer be any feeding of the dogs coming from my portion of the town. Moreover, if your people try to cross the border, I'll have them gutted and strung up for the rest to see. Then you can feed them to your little pets." Hrothgar shot up in his saddle in shock. "You're threatening the High Thane with open war while on campaign." "Oh, stow it, Hrothgar. You're not in charge here. You're only High Thane in name. You belittled the Broken for their savagery at Delmore, but you're willing to feed their monsters innocent people if it suits you." "Innocent people?" Hrothgar laughed in her face. "Listen to you, Vilissa Ulfrin. Would Wolfbane approve of this sudden emergence of conscience? We have a task to complete. The gnolls give us the best chance of success, and we have access to enough people of no value to keep them happy. Meanwhile, you're drawing up battle lines between your little loyalists and the rest of the army. Did you finally drink yourself into such a stupor that you suddenly decided to be noble? Have you forgotten that you also turned traitor against the Napoleon Empire when given the chance? I'm not allowing this. If they're in my quarter, you will leave them alone." Hrothgar said nothing, looking down at her from his saddle. Then he slowly moved himself out of her way. "Fine. We can scrounge up enough outside your little safe haven to keep the gnolls happy. But I will not forget this moment of weakness and insubordination. You'll pay for it. Soon." The rat-like man rode off, leaving Vilissa standing on the street in the mud and dirty snow. She watched him go, wondering just how much of a risk she was really taking. She shook her head. It didn't matter. The sword mistress had decided that this was where she would take a stand. To back down now would be weakness. She marched to the door of the inn and threw it open, casting a dark look about the room as if daring anyone to accost her. Walking up to the bar, she motioned a soldier out of her favorite seat and planted herself there. Mara came by wordlessly and dropped off a mug in front of her. Vilissa took it in her hands and stared at the drink. Then she said, "If you need to, you and your boy can stay in my part of town. It's safer." Mara was washing a plate, but she turned and looked at Vilissa. The Napoleon had expected some expression of gratitude, but what she got was an unimpressed snort. "I heard you locked down one section. Decided that letting people be butchered and eaten was a bridge too far for you. Well, don't look to me for congratulations on being a little bit less of a monster than the rest of them." Vilissa was shocked. She did not respond at first, and Mara started to turn away, but she recovered and yelled, "What do you want from me? I tried to do something at least. I'm here to take the land for the god of death, unite all mortals of Tetzanir, and end the fighting between every nation and would-be kingdom." "So you're putting an end to violence by killing people and destroying their homes?" Mara set the plate down and walked over, utterly unafraid of the far more dangerous woman. She leaned in, close enough that Vilissa could hear her whispering, "You can ease your conscience all you like with little acts of defiance, but you are as responsible as the others. Maybe you feel guilt about it. Good. But you're still allowed it to happen. Creating a safe zone for some does not change that." She stepped back and nodded at Vilissa's untouched mug. "You ought to drink that while it's still fresh. It's only your first, so you might actually notice it if it went a bit stale." Furious but unable to respond, Vilissa kicked away from the bar and hurled her stool to the floor. She stormed to the inn door, wrenched it open, and disappeared into the cold winter air, leaving her drink on the counter. Mara reached out and took it calmly, sizing up the pour, and then dumped it into the trough behind the bar and started rinsing out the mug for the next patron. That's chapter 12, and we will have chapter 13 and 14 tomorrow. Again, times are going to fluctuate a little bit, but it will be up and ready for everybody to check out. So, thanks for listening.